session, I would like to call Noirita. In this session, we have three eminent speakers to enlighten us with their knowledge. With the chair's permission, I would like to introduce the speakers. Our first invited speaker of this session is Professor Debashish Debnath.
Hello?
Welcome, sir.
Yeah, audible?
Yes, sir,
Am I
you are
audible?
audible. Yes, sir, you are audible. Yeah.
Okay.
Our first invited speaker of this session is Professor Debashish Debnath, who holds the prestigious Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Chair and Dean School of Ambedkar Thoughts and Philosophy at the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University of Social Sciences, now at Indore district of Madhya Pradesh. Professor Debnath has more than 30 years of experience in the field of anthropology for holding the position of Fellow at Asiatic Society. In his early days, he being Research Associate at Anthropological Survey of India to currently holding the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Chair, which is located near the birthplace of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. He was previously being associated with Indian Institute of Forest Management, firstly as assistant professor and later promoted as associate professor. Professor Debnath has written as many as 28 research articles in different national and international research journals, 4 books, and number of other research publications as book chapters, seminar proceedings, book reviews, and popular articles. His latest monograph, entitled as The Limbus of the Eastern Himalayas 2021, is also instrumental in reflecting on Sino-Tibetan tribal studies of India. Such a feat is quite impressive and should be lauded befittingly. In this vein, without any further delay in this session, I would like to hand over to Dr. Debashish Debnath, which is chaired by Dr. Kanchan Mukhopadhyay, and he is joining us online.
Good morning, everybody. Respected chair, distinguished audiences, ladies and gentlemen, I express my deep gratitude to organizing committee, especially the convener, Professor Subroto Shankar Bakchi, for giving me an opportunity to deliver a speech on this very important seminar, Relevancy of Dr. Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar in Anthropology. So, without losing any time or spare, I just can you understand? Just a second, it is not coming now. Hello? My presentation is not visible. Hello?
Yeah, you are audible, sir. You are audible.
It is audible, but presentation is not coming now.
Yeah, no.
Is it coming?
No, sir, not now. Now it's coming, now it's coming.
Coming in now. It's coming. It is coming now?
No,
Hello?
not now, sir.
Is it presentation is visible?
No, sir, no, sir. Hey.
Hello? Is it presentation visible?
No, sir, no, sir. It's not visible now. It's not visible.
just a minute, just a second. Please,
Dr. Shubhajit Namaskar, kindly mute yourself.
is it visible? Visible?
Yeah, now it's visible.
Okay, just. ये तो यहाँ तो है स्टॉप शेयरिंग में तो लोग बोल रहे विजिबल नहीं है नहीं दिख रहा लेकिन
Yeah. Sir, it's visible.
Hello.
Audible. It's visible and you're also audible, sir. You go for your presentation.
Is it
Thank you.
visible now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, I would like to present a paper on the topic Bharat Ratna Babasaheb, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, an epitome on relevancy in anthropology. Okay, so normally the anthropology is a very broad subject. It's coming under social science. Okay, coming under social science and starting from different point of view, ethnography, social ethnology, structure, organization frame in social, economy, political, religious, and aesthetics aspects from earlier primitive or simple society to complex society in various conceptual and theoretical ways with socialistic and humanistic methodological approaches and tools and techniques. Whatever the beginning, that is a description and comparative or structural thing, but you know in the three phases of Indian anthropology, Babasaheb Ambedkar thoughts and philosophies have been relevant in day by day in anthropology. And I have expressed here Babasaheb, basically he was a great thinker, academician, philosopher, lawyer, even renowned intellectual, anthropologist, and he was our constitution, known as the maker of our constitution. He has been day by day has been relevant in anthropology. Even I have expressed in my title as an epitome of anthropology, because if we read in his different paper, particularly if we know his biography, which he expressed in his famous book published in 1935, or that is the Waiting for a Visa, and several stories he has given from the school life to later in his life, and he expressed that all things I have seen is a part of anthropology, which I want to discuss, but time is very limited. Basically, he is the icon of Dalit movement, or you can say that for the liberation. Even he was the initiator. He was the initiator of several human rights movement. And these all things, and day by day, have come in the anthropology. Now, what is the relation that I have told? Looking into his life sketch and experiences, we have found a lot of suffering, hatred, negligence in his life. And if you see, I am living in the place of his, actually, his birthplace, not far away from my university, 1.5 kilometers away from this. He was born in a village, Kalipaltan, just 1.5 kilometers. Now it has been changed completely. And it is very close to even their military cantonment. But even if you enter this thing, you can understand it's a cantonment area. There are two ways, one way through cantonment, other side by outside the cantonment. We entered these things. So you'll find a very remote, isolated ones when he was born in 1891. And even in his sufferings, you know, in the school, he's very no peon, no water, even water was not given to these things. After that, we know very shortly. I am telling you the personal support from the various, particularly Krishnaji Arjun Keleskar and other person support, and then he joined in the education in the Columbia University later, giving this fellowship from Maharaja Baroda, Shahaji Baroda. And later he also developed, he is the person who got the 4 times doctorate, 1 DSc and 2 was also from the honoria causa. He got it. However, he's a highly intellectual person, and he developed throughout the movement, the several movements that I want to discuss over here, and want to relate with this thing with anthropology. And what is the thing he has made? I have told you that I tried to make them some theoretical relation with his life history event. Say for instance, I mentioned the Krishnaji Arjun, Keleskar and other persons helped. They are outside the society. Mahar community was actually compartmentalized in a very small area, and they are highly neglected, hatred. And even Babasaheb sat on the outside of the classroom. Even he attempted to answer any question asked by the teacher. He was obviously overlooked. Is this person? And I already mentioned. So whatever these things, say for example, his father, Ramaji Maluji, gave the Ambaware, his village name, Ambaware. But one person, a Brahmin, Ambedkar, changed his surname is Ambedkar. So his name is Babasaheb Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. So I want to explain that is the interpersonal relation interaction within the outside the community, which we come in from a social structural theme of Redfieldian model. So that is giving an opportunity of upbringing in the outer world. Otherwise, 2 persons help him. Keleskar and another person helped him to get this scholarship in Columbia University, and that was very small amount also in comparison to today's money. However, that also a ethnic boundary also we are very in Mahar. Even in the Mahar did not get any opportunity even to own the property, to touch the water, to enter the temple. It is a great ethnic boundary, which is a very important part of the anthropology. And out of that, he made the several social reformative movements for social change and showing the social dynamism or impact aspect of civilization. Say for example, what I want to tell, he was in a community bounded by a community of the very lowest rung of our Hindu social order. He interacted with the persons that, for example, one day he was sitting in the tree reading in a book, and the Keleskar asked him, why you were sitting over here? Why not library? Well, I am not allowed to sit in the library. Then he is a very intelligent, talented, intelligent student. He offered him a book, gifted a book written by Keleskar, Gautam Buddha. So from the through beginning of this life, he was also inspired. I am telling you the Redfieldian complex of continuum, that is also Professor Surjit Sinha made in the Trifecus continuum. I am telling you, if you see the boundary, normally the tribal in the remote, inaccessible area living, their ethnic boundary, whatever it is also a boundary. And we found the continuum, interaction with the outsider world. If they're not there, how we got the change of the surname from Ambaware to Ambedkar. And also the scholarship with the help of a person and interacted with the Saji, Baroda Maharaj, Saji Rao. Then the basic things which is coming, the matter, untouchability. Today, the word we don't find. And but what I am telling you, that untouchability word, I have already explained, and I have quoted down some ideas from a article written by Professor Abhijit Guha in a forwarded press, a article. Some points I have noted down from here. Nicely he has written this thing, that G.S. Gure in his book Caste and Class India, he mentioned Ambedkar on page number 12 as the leader of the scheduled caste, even though the author discussed at the length the importance of endogamy in characterizing India's caste system. And I will come to his concept of endogamy, which has formed the whole Hindu social order, making the boundary for the different strata. Professor Guha also mentioned this matter, Western socialists, especially Louis Dumont, in his book Homo Hierarchicus, discussed very vividly, lucidly the social hierarchy to analyze caste system in structure, whereas McIntyre gave more emphasis on regional local variation. They are in different parochialization and universalism theory. And we also find the dynamism of caste system which is expressed by M.N. Similas in Sanskritization. I am telling you, this Sanskritization, Babasaheb once told his own community to reform their attitudes, behavior, norms and other things, take the very higher quality of job. Otherwise, we cannot be focused in our outsider world. And what M.N. Srinivas told in with the mentioned reference word Sanskritization. Marxist scholar analyzed the caste system in class formation, but Babasaheb Ambedkar found that was the origin of the caste system and rigid endogamy. So this is the thing. Again, I am telling you, this is the very important, he is famous in the world. His 18-page paper, Caste in India, their mechanism, genesis and development. Certain contain pure and detached academic study. Okay. And if you read these things, even he has discussed that how the caste system and formed, beginning from the conflict, ethnic conflict, and the broken man, they took the shelter in the other things and became isolated from the society, and how they maintained by their endogamy. Okay. The part I have mentioned here, which I have noted down, there also mentioned this thing in his paper, he has mentioned here, without being biased, pointed out the shortcomings in understanding of the essential feature of the caste system, which he pointed out. It's a very world-famous paper, I think. Then another thing is that division of labor, Durkheimian theory of division of labor, which form the social division and the structural organization thing. But Babasaheb told this is the matter of not the stratigraphy, that it is a division of not division of labor, it is a division of laboring classes. But you are entitled for this. And so marriage outside one's own immediate kin group or clan exoby was the fundamental universal feature of human society in India. Tribal exogamy survived through different stages of civilization, whereas in the modern world is no longer the rule. So we find that tribal exogamy is there, but our structure we find that endogamy. Now this is the very thing that I have noted down from this thing. It is actually quoted from Professor Guha's paper actually. With the growth of history, however, endogamy has lost its efficacy, and accepting the nearest blood kin, there is usually no social bar restricting the field of marriage, but regarding peoples of India, the law of exogamy is a positive injunction. Even today, Indian society still suffers the clan system, even though there are no clans, and that this can be easily seen from the law of matrimony, which centers around the principle of exogamy. For it is not that Sapindas, blood kings, cannot marry, but marriage even between Sadgosra Shabda is regarded as sacrilege. So we can find that he analyzed the history and found a lot of changes by Brahmanical administration. He mentioned it, and whole fight or whole struggle is to remove this struggle, even will come. Now we know our whole thoughts, an icon of Dalit movement, an icon of human rights movement for liberations of the depressed sections, but You know, he is a such intellectual, go into every sphere. Particularly, he has written good number of paper on the land holdings, small land holdings, very similar, very important, recognized, well-recognized paper, and which is the acute problem, because a large section of the people who are living at the lowest rung of the our Hindu social order, they are not owning land. If we study, we find the landless laborers are more found in the lowest rung. Upper is the ownership we find, and that is the cause, the disadvantages, and of the resource utilization. Productivity and agriculture, he also mentioned that not only holding, also the support required for capital, labor, and other inputs. On the other hand, small size land become productive if the resources are available in plenty. With the this type of capital, labor, and other, you know, the different schemes of their agriculture, we gave their support to the different way. Is this we are giving one of the things, a step few years we are running MGA and REGA, also we find that one good example. He also mentioned about the slavery and exploitation of labor bounded under caste system, extremely bad for economic development, he has mentioned, and fought for its abolition. His other suggestions for solving the agricultural problem are collective farming, economic holding of land or equal distribution of land, large-scale industrialization, provision of credit, water seeds, and fertilizers by the government, cultivation of wasteland by allocating wasteland to landless labor, minimum wages to laborers, control and regulation of private landers, of loan to farmers. If you see this paragraph I have written, today in the action, development, and action and development anthropology, these are the all important characteristics for the development of the tribals and the oppressed and marginalized section. These all kinds of suggestions of agricultural economic development and followed in social anthropological study for socio-economic development of their and the further studies helps in these. Now political movements, if you see the political movement, then we come to the matter of this is basically he started from the political movement starting from 1920, the intellectual movement. He published several fortnight magazines like Book Nayak, Equality and Janta, Bahishkrit Samaj, this type of thing. A lot of movements he took started. And the political movements gave the result of the liberation for the rights of the liberation and the rights of the workers and peasants. In the late 1920s, especially in the 1930s, when he formed the Independent Labour Party, he took up the cause of tenants from both Dalit and Mahars and the caste Hindu Kunbis in the Konkan region of Maharashtra. With the support of the radicals, then in the Congress Socialist Party, the Independent Labour Party organized a huge march of 20,000 peasants in Mumbai in 1938. The largest pre-independent peasant mobilization in the region. In the same year, Ambedkar joined with the communists to organize strike on Mumbai textiles workers in protest against the bill about to be introduced by the British government to curb labor's strike. He was not very follower of Marxist theories, and but in this case he also joined the communists, so-called communists. Ambedkar took the lead in condemning the bill in the assembly and argued the right to strike was simply another name for the right to freedom of assembly. The individual leaders and organizations lead the Dalit movements and struggles. The farmer has great impact than the latter because the Dalit organization has sustained for a long time because of organization and several other problems. Through all of them have done commendable humanitarian work and left the great impact on the Dalit. During colonial periods, there are several organized movements such as Adi Dhara movement in Punjab, Ilya movement in Naranguru in Kerala, and Adi Hindu movement in UP, Bengal Namashudra movement, Adi Davidas in Tamil Nadu, Adi Andhera in coastal Andhra, and Adi Hindu in Hyderabad. In the post-independent area, several militant organizations emerged mainly as a result of Dr. Ambedkar's thoughts and struggles. Dalit Panthers, led by several leaders in 1970s mass movement of Raja Dhale and Namdev Hasal Kansiram Bahujan Party, Dalit Sangharsh Samiti in Karnataka, several other unorganized movements thought have been existence. They have split into several units due to petty reasons and lost their original force and impact. But still they are alive and they are been feeling isolation and victimization. So what I'm telling you, this is all parts of our social movement thing, which is initiated by Dr. Ambedkar, and is a part of anthropology and sociology if you read the book of Ghanshyam Saha's social movement. Then we come to the religious conversion, and Ambedkar had own perception of diagnosis of Hindu religion and its caste system. The untouchables are treated as the marginals of the society. The Hindu religion had imposed upon them the myth of their own natural inferiority and thereby had put them in a submissive silence and in a cultural silence. Professor David Bundell also mentioned these things, culture of silence. He chose Buddhism. Actually, when he was very much hurt by Hindu oppression by the upper section, he studied world religion. Sikh also offered him to join there. He also Muslim religion. And a famous book you know, and that is the Thoughts on Pakistan, also in 1945. He wrote also. But he chose Buddhism and conversion was taken place. Because that conversion, all basic principles like equality, liberty and fraternity, these strident principles of Babasaheb, that is he developed throughout his dharma conversion, not only conversion, it is the basis of our constitution. So, he told, I have not borrowed this idea from Buddhism. I have brought this idea from French Revolution. I brought this from the Buddhism. So, what if his thoughts and lists of Hindu religion and consequently conversion help a social anthropologists to do research in religion, especially in the tribal religion and their conversion in the other religion due to socio-economic factors. And my PhD thesis about tribal religiosity, I have found when is the isolated Lodha community or Kora community comparison the Mahali community and the Santhal and the Munda community. That is the good stratigraphy that I gave there the tribal religiosity. And that is the in socio-economic interaction. Finally, education. Actually, Babasaheb, if you talk the matter of the education, he had done, even I could recognize education as the major tool, he said. I mean, he developed through education only. You know how many books are available in his, where are 50,000, and he gave them, he was highly intellectual. He had recognized education as a major tool of discrimination masses to stand up and claim their right. Ambedkar last two words emphasize educate, organize and educate. But the base of the education would provide rational strength and the perseverance, which distinguishes between truth and cultural opinion. His speeches many a time mention the transformative nature of education, which he would have imbibed from the diverse range of academic learning he had in country and abroad. His philosophical determinants have not been cherished by academicians of the country, nor has been liberation ideas for the depressed classes discussed on national platform by the upper classes. He wrote on various issues, but the textbook, but the academia of India have ignored his thoughts and guidance. He was very much inspired by Jyotiba Phule, who's a practical man, and you know his contributions for, and his wife, Savitri Bai Phule, for the primary education and education.
Professor Devnath, sorry for the interruption, but now you have to conclude.
So I am on the last, the fragment of my speech.
Please,
and
please.
Finally,
Wrap it
I will, as per the chair, I try to do small one of the gender mainstreaming is a very important part, particularly the emancipation empowering women. His contribution to the idea of women education, women freedom in society. Ambedkar created awareness of poor little women and inspired them to fight against the unjust and social practice like child marriage, devdasi, prostitution. He insisted Hindu Code Bill is a long history, you know. Hindu Code Bill is initiated in 1946 and presented in the Constituent Assembly 48 and also presented in 1951. And when it was refused to pass, He resigned from the ministry. And last, I am telling you today, whenever the anthropologists are working, not more in the ethnography, ethnology, social structure, they are working in the action anthropology, applied anthropology, development anthropology, which is the constitution impetus. He wanted to inquire legal safeguards in the constitution of India and to bring regulatory reforms and to bring equalities and to pave the way for positive discrimination towards oppressed classes, including women. So it is a very important contribution to the present day development and the nation building. Tribe principles followed the drafting of the Indian Constitution, and we know that protection and the safeguards of the particularly the people in the lower strata, where he established the social democracy, state socialism through constitution, is very important. I would like to conclude that Dr. Ambedkar thoughts and philosophy have come out with the life experiences, and his wisdom, being highly educated person. The above discussion reveals scopes and implications of Babasaheb principles and ideologies as followed up in various subdivisions of social anthropology. I have discussed structural anthropology, economic anthropology, political anthropology, and development anthropology. And finally, I would like to say that Babasaheb is not the icon of Dalit movement. Babasaheb is he is recognized in different paper as an anthropologist. So thank you very much for and your patience for this thing. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Devnath. I propose that we discuss all the presentations at the end of the session. Okay. So
No,
let us.
I'm sorry to say, I have been actually slightly busy. Maybe I would be not attended at the last moment. If it be possible, I am very interested to listen to others also. So if there is any question at at this moment, I will be happy to listen, but happy to answer also if anybody any interest. And I will present at the last moment of the session, but some official works also they have, because examination, I have been also examiner controller of the institute.
Okay. Let us see if there are questions, but I will request you to be here with us till end of the session. Is there any question right now?
Okay.
Any question, any observation right now? No, it seems no. But let them think about.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will be also waiting. Any interest?
Please.
To know about Babasaheb and application and or implementation of Babasaheb thoughts and philosophy, and I will be very happy. So I will also attend you till the end of the session.
Okay. Thank you very much. And for questions, please check the chat box also. Some questions can be put there.
Yes.
Too. Okay.
Yes.
Let us invite the next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee. I will chair also. I will be here. Okay, please continue. Let's continue.
Thank you, Professor Debashish Devnath, for his illuminating speech. Our next invited speaker for this session is Professor Shomir Kumar Das. He will be joining with us online.
Yes, can you hear me?
Welcome, sir. Welcome to the department. Before you start with your speech, I would like to give a brief introduction on the behalf of our chair. Professor Shomir Kumar Das, a professor of political science and presently holding the position of Director, Institute of Foreign Policy Studies at University of Calcutta. He was also the former Vice Chancellor of University of North Bengal, Dean, Faculty of Arts, University of Calcutta, and Adjunct Professor at the School of Foreign Service, Georgetown University in the year 2014. Currently, he is the coordinator of University Grants Commission, Departmental Research Support Program on the Democratic Governance, a postdoctoral fellow of the Social Science Research Council, and was a visiting fellow at the European Academy of Italy in the year 2008 and also the visiting professor at Northeast Indian Studies program at Jawaharlal Nehru University of New Delhi in the year 2014. Professor Das has written over 190 research paper in different national and international journal of repute and edited volume, authored, edited and co-edited 19 books, and has been the regular reviewer of many esteemed journal, publishing houses and research body. He specializes in and writes on the issues like ethnicity, security, migration, human rights, justice and democracy, thus making him an indispensable part of this international seminar. With the permission of the chair, I would now like to request Professor Shomir Kumar Das to begin with his speech for the continuation of the second session of the international seminar. And this session has been chaired by Dr. Kanchan Mukhopadhyay.
Thank you for the generous introduction, and thanks to the chair. In order to keep myself within time, I will first of all begin with a word of thanks to the Department of Anthropology for having given me the precious opportunity of sharing what I still consider as some of my extremely tentative and uncut thoughts. And it's in a seminar like this that you can toss around some of these ideas and can actually be enriched by the feedback from the floor. In order to keep myself within time, I have written down a few paragraphs which I will read, maybe wherever necessary with some occasional interpolations and explanations. In his address, the title of my presentation is Dr. Ambedkar and the Dilemmas of a Moral Community. In his address to the nation on 19th November 2021, Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi, announced the repeal of 3 farm laws with the following words, I quote, "Today I have come to tell you and the whole country that we have decided to repeal all 3 farm laws. In the ensuing parliament session that begins later this month, we will complete the constitutional process to repeal these 3 farm laws. One may recall that the 3 farm laws passed on 17th September 2020 hit a hornet's nest across India and perhaps the world ever since they were introduced to Parliament, and the idea of reforming the agricultural economy was mooted by the ruling party. Farmers, mainly from Punjab, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh, started protesting on the outskirts of Delhi, demanding immediate repeal of the 3 farm laws since 26 November 2020. On one hand, the laws were criticized on the ground that they were enacted by Parliament in great haste, hardly leaving any scope for discussion, and as the Indian Express put it, without any discussion. The government, however, maintained that the 3 laws were legislated by a duly elected body, fully authorized to pass them. On the other hand, laws were criticized also on the ground that these would deprive the farmers of the protection from the government hitherto enjoyed by them and expose them to the vagaries of the market forces. In accordance with the Prime Minister's announcement, Farm Laws Repeal Bill 2021 was introduced in Lok Sabha on 29th November 2021 by Sri Narendra Singh Tomar, the Minister of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare, Government of India. The government's decision of repealing the 3 farm laws is certainly not the first in the series of repeal and withdrawal of laws enacted by a duly constituted legislative body. On the one hand, it is obvious that the farmers felt elated. On being asked why Kisan Sansads, literally sessions of farmers' parliament with no official authority of making laws, were being held, when a duly elected parliament with people's representatives fully authorized to make laws was holding its session not too far from where they were sitting in Varna and organizing these Sansads, an octogenarian farmer replied, quote, "Kanun sarak pe hi banta," unquote. Laws are made on the streets. While he was referring to the multiple points of lawmaking in the society, the Prime Minister, on the other hand, attributed the government's decision of repeal to their own deficiency in penance. Tapasya is the word which Prime Minister used. An inability to explain to the people something that was as clear as the light of the lamp to the lawmakers. More than winning elections, forming a majority in parliament, and enacting a law as per the textbook prerequisites of representative democracy, the Prime Minister underlined the importance of explaining and with the effect of successfully justifying the laws to the whole country. This was the expression which he used. And the people in a democracy. Prime Minister's use of the term the whole country is significant. Does this introduce a distinction between people of the whole country on the one hand and the electoral majority, or the majority of voters who have voted them to power on the other? Why is winning elections not the be all and end all of democracy? How are the people of the whole country constituted into a body? Does the preamble have any does the people have any constitutional status? What does the Constitution say about the people? Unfortunately, the question is dismissed more often than not, and the people of India is understood to mean the Indian nation, the latter being historically constituted as a body long before the Constitution was adopted, enacted, and given to itself by the same body. The nation, according to Dr. Ambedkar, the key architect of the Constitution, was a great, then I quote, delusion at best and dangerously short-sighted, unquote. In a country like India, historically divided into innumerable castes, communities, ethnicities, and so forth, and the, quote, pre-democratic ideologies associated with them cut into the very fiber of the nation. For him, the people can potentially be knit into a body insofar as the act of knitting together, then I quote, fulfills the minimum moral conditions, unquote, laid down in the Constitution. This is a quote from Akash Singh Rathor's recently published book called Dr. Ambedkar's Preamble. This came out from Penguin. The body, therefore, does not predate the Constitution. I mean, we, the people of India, does not predate the Constitution. It comes into existence thanks to the Constitution. In this address, I make a modest attempt at unpacking and making sense of the complicated relationship between we, the people of India, that the Constitution begins with, constituted as a moral community on the one hand, and the Constitution and system of law on the other. Does we, the people, as a body pre-exist the Constitution? Or is it the very Constitution that brings the moral community into existence? Dr. Ambedkar, Valerian Rodriguez tells us, felt the necessity of crafting a system of law, for he, quote, saw reason and morality as far too feeble to ensure social bonds without the authoritative dictates expressed in law. In other words, he was underlining the importance of law in enforcing the moral standards laid down and guiding a moral community. Dr. Ambedkar, according to this view, would look upon the Constitution and the system of law as a vehicle of revolutionary changes in the economic and social life of the people without bloodshed. It was Dr. Ambedkar who, more than many of his contemporaries, made a plea for differentiating social ethics, which he also synonymously describes as moral principles in his writings, from we, the people of India, commonly taken as being historically constituted as a nation. In simple terms, we, the people, as a moral community, founded on such moral principles as justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, as enumerated in the preamble to the Constitution of India, is more often than not in conflict with we the people of India as a historically constituted nation, divided as it is into a multiplicity of castes, communities, ethnicities, and so forth, with the unfreedom, injustice, inequality, and heterogeneity inherent in it. His recognition of social ethics as an essential ingredient of the constitution of moral community, according to Jean Drèze, has not lost its relevance. This is a book which came out in 2018. In course of this discussion, I propose to raise three different sets of questions. First, the example we began with concerning farmers' agitation shows how the constitution and law of the land often finds it difficult, if not impossible, to subsume and absorb the moral community, as much as the moral community often refuses to be bound by the dictates of constitution and system of law. While the moral is not necessarily subsumed under the legal constitutional, the moral exists what the French anthropologists would describe as supplement, supplement, that does not melt in the legal constitutional. Our constitution and system of law in the country, I will argue, institute the moral without being able to necessarily invest it with constitutional and legal sanctions. In the first part, we will make a relevant reference to the constitutional provisions and the art of making the constitution in the Constituent Assembly. Dr. Ambedkar, more than most of his contemporaries, was aware of the insurgent potential of the moral community instituted by the constitution and system of law, a phenomenon which is now known as insurgent constitutionalism. Secondly, how does a moral community come into existence? Can moral principles be the foundation of a moral community? Or is it that the members of a community, by virtue of being a part of the moral community, uphold, observe, and adhere to certain moral principles that are critical to their survival as a moral community in times of crisis, as historical anthropologists like Eric Wolff and E.P. Thompson would have us believe? Thirdly, and I don't think that I will have time to address the third question, but let me sort of raise the third question. If the principal aim of Dr. Ambedkar's project is to build a moral community on the basis of certain moral principles, then why should the ambit of such a moral community remain confined to we the people of India and not to we the people of the world, as the philosophers like Immanuel Kant and philosophical anthropologists like Richard McKeown and his associates would argue? Accordingly, my address is divided into three parts. Please allow me to return to the first example I began with while answering the first question. Does people as an indivisible body of the whole country that Prime Minister Modi was referring to have any constitutional status? The constitution begins with the phrase, we the people of India, that by all accounts transcends the majority-minority divide, otherwise marking the electorate. Apparently, the constitution stipulates no criterion for one's qualification for being an integral part of we the people of India. It, on the contrary, stipulates the criteria for becoming a voter. Does this appear in the constitution as the opening phrase and then conveniently disappear from the text without leaving any trace? It is possible to argue that we the people of India does not seem to disappear into the blue immediately after adopting, enacting, and giving to itself the constitution. The constitution, I will argue, works hard to first of all ensure that we the people as a body exists as an undifferentiated whole and as a living body on an enduring basis. If the term people is ever deployed to refer to any section thereof, presupposing thereby any division within it, it is done evidently to emphasize the need for integration of that section into the body of the people, and most importantly, the need for making some special provisions for that section so that, quote, inequalities are minimized, Article 38.2, which actually informs the entire philosophy of reservation, and the bond of unity that holds we the people of India together is strengthened. One may refer to Articles 38, 1.1, 38, 2, 46, and 47, in which the term people occurs as a reference is made to it. And in each case, the state is urged to take measures that will, quote, strive to promote the welfare of the people, unquote, not this or that section of the people, but of the people as a whole. Incidentally, all these articles are incorporated in the chapter on directive principles of state policy, a chapter that by all accounts was closest to Dr. Ambedkar's heart. Article 38.1, for instance, succinctly puts it, quote, the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting as effectively as it may a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall inform all the institutions of the national life, unquote. Drawing on the proceedings of the Constituent Assembly debates, I have argued elsewhere that inequality, injustice, and exploitation are viewed by the fathers of the Indian Constitution, and more so by Dr. Ambedkar, as threats, not because any weaker section, scheduled caste, or scheduled tribe is adversely affected by these phenomena, but because these pose a threat to the social order per se, to we the people as a whole. That implies that a variety of sections, castes, tribes, and so forth live essentially in harmony within an order so that they form one single, indivisible we the people of India. The existence of we the people of India is a function of the social order that the state must strive to create and maintain through its policies. While the constitutional provisions mentioned above are in the nature of principles that the state is directed to observe in course of framing its policies, the principles by and large are non-enforceable by law. Besides, we may refer to the provision that the President of India is obligated by the oath she or he takes on the assumption of the office to, quote, devote himself to the service and well-being of the people of India. Look how the word people is used here, unquote. As much as the governor of a state within the Indian Union is obligated by the oath she or he takes to, quote, devote himself to the service and well-being of the people of the respective state. In sum, we the people of India, according to Dr. Ambedkar, exists as a moral community with its ambiguous legal and constitutional status, but constantly acting as a counterpoise to the rule of the elected majority, if ever it shows signs of turning into a tyranny. If the directive principles speak of the necessity of instituting a social order based on the principles of liberty, equality, justice, and fraternity, then the moral community's resolute refusal to remain bound by law was expressed to the farmers' agitation. It is thus possible for the farmers' organizations to argue, as they did in fact, that the farm laws were detrimental to the social order envisaged in the Constitution, as distinguishable from the more commonly used phrase law and order, and therefore posed a threat to we the people of India as a body. Social order based on moral principles and law and order are not necessarily in harmony with each other. So the farmers sat in a prolonged dharna that reportedly often turned violent and went out of hands. The administration accused the farmers of violating the law and order and took stern action against the offenders, while the farmers believed that it was to strengthen the social order that they sat in the dharna. I come to the second part of my presentation, which is titled An Anthropology of Moral Community. Anthropological literature is replete with studies in how the moral community comes into existence and evolves, negotiates, changes, and wherever possible, devises its moral principles in keeping with the changing requirements of time, mainly in times when it faces a threat to its own existence. The moral principles are not necessarily derived from the Constitution and law. In fact, the Constitution and law work on a vast repertoire of moral principles that are already in existence in any given society. Now, Ambedkar's problem is that he expects a moral community to come into being afresh in a vacuous way. In an interesting lecture delivered in 2004, Clifford Geertz calls for, quote, looking at the system of law against the background of the sort of society in which it is embedded, confusion that surrounds it, the confusion it confronts, the confusion it causes, the confusion it responds to, unquote. After all, why should we the people have to become we the people of India? The moral principles that the Constitution and law of the land seek to introduce can be operational only when they are mediated through the society in which they are expected to percolate and function. A moral community is not culturally vacuous, nor does a moral community cleanse and wipe all the cultural traces that pre-exist the introduction of moral principles and the enterprise of moral engineering accompanying it. It is thus obvious that the people as a body, according to the preamble, are also organized into we the people of India. That is to say, as the Indian nation, and not merely as a moral community bound only by the moral principles laid down by the Constitution. If democracy implies rule of the people, then it also comes to mean what Cuba Troth, while introducing a recently published volume, calls rule of a particular people, unquote. Viewed in this light, what the Constitution describes as we the people of India becomes, to borrow from Clifford Geertz, once again, unquote, a clatter of crossing desires, contending assumptions and disparate identities, unquote. In other words, the moral moral principles that Dr. Ambedkar wants to introduce are required to function within a society which already has its own cultural traces that the moral standards and moral principles cannot easily wipe out. Dr. Ambedkar would still have viewed moral principles as a great leveler, contributing to the constitution of we, the people of India, as a moral community along the principles of liberty, equality, justice, and fraternity. In fact, one of his missions was to address the question of disparate identities through the constitution and system of law, whether within India or abroad. The problem lies not so much in the fact that people having disparate identities do not appreciate or subscribe to the moral principles enshrined in the constitution and system of law, but in the very fact that they ab initio perceive themselves as a people, distinctive from we the people of India. Their existence as a distinctive body of people, according to them, prevails over the universality of the moral principles Dr. Ambedkar had set forth for us. Let me cite an example. I will not take much time. The Naga National Council, NNC, the rebel body with its initial demand for complete independence of the Naga country, was the first to have challenged the authority of we the people of India over the Naga Hills, then a district of the undivided Assam. A day before India became independent, on 14th of August 1947, a referendum, for example, was conducted under the auspices back on 16th of May 1951 in the erstwhile Naga Hills to determine whether the Nagas formed part of we the people of India and would prefer to be included in the newly established body politic or constituted another people with their particular way of life, history, culture, and so forth. A whopping 99.99% of them cast their votes in favor of, quote, a sovereign and independent Nagaland that would be fully free from India. In pursuance of this verdict, Nagas abstained from the first general election, and almost all the ballot boxes returned empty from the district as a result in 1952. Interestingly, the Naga rebel discourse does not question the universality of the moral principles embodied in the Constitution of India. In fact, they are appreciative of the moral principles laid down in our Constitution. Theirs is not a critique of the Constitution and the moral principles informing it. What they argue is that the Nagas constitute a body of people with their unique history, quote, and a unique way of life, quote, as much as we, the people of India, constitute one, and therefore are entitled to a body politic of their own, with a separate constitution informed by the same moral principles. The outcome of this battle between Dr. Ambedkar's legal constitutional solution to the ethnic and nationality question and anthropology of moral community is always contingent and uncertain. Dr. Ambedkar's project of founding we the moral community, we the people as a moral community, will always return to haunt the ruling elite, in terms of farmers' agitation being the latest example, and will often force them to exceed the limits set by the letter of law and the Constitution. And that's why I say that the moral community always implies insurgent constitutionalism. It will not lose relevance as long as a moral community refuses to remain bound and scaffolded by Constitution and law of the land. But Dr. Ambedkar's insistence on building the moral community through the instrumentality of the Constitution and law of the land will always tweaked, nibbled, and interrupted by the anthropology of moral community. Subjecting a moral community to the Constitution and system of law is, after all, not an easy task. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Das. And again, let me repeat, I propose that we take up the questions, the discussion at the end of the session, because there will be one more presentation, and we can go for discussion after the third presentation. So,
Thank you, Professor Shomir Kumar Das, for his illuminating lecture. Our next invited speaker for this session is Shri Shubhajit Noshkar. He will be joining with us online. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the department. Before you start your speech, I would like to give a brief introduction of yours on the behalf of our chair. Shri Shubhajit Noshkar is currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of International Relations at Jadavpur University. He received his MPhil degree from Jawaharlal Nehru University in the year 2014, and his field of specialization includes issues of South Asian politics, debates on secularism and communalism in India, politics of Muslim minority in India, Dalits politics in contemporary India, role of political Islam in Pakistan, Indo-Pak relation, issues of Kashmir, and so on. Moreover, he has published himself as a vocal anti-caste voice through multi-level participation in debates, discussion, podcast through this research on caste-related social construction in Bengali society. His recent articles, published in prestigious magazines like Outlook and Standpoint at the time of pandemic, revolved around the issues of political underpinnings of COVID-19, the gendered impact of pandemic, and addressing the need for social safeguarding measures for protecting marginalized people. With the permission of Chair, I would like to request Shri Shubhajit Noshkar for his speech for the continuation of the second session of our international seminar, which is chaired by Dr. Kanchan Mukhopadhyay. Sir, please.
Should I go ahead? Am I audible? My audio
Sir,
is
you are
clear,
audible.
right? Okay. So, first of all, let me at the very outset thank Professor Das, who is the head of the department at the Department of Anthropology of Calcutta University, and also Professor Bakshi, who is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Chair, for inviting me to this great international seminar on relevance of Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar in modern anthropology. This is basically a quite a rare because Dr. Ambedkar's the discussions on Dr. Ambedkar has always been something like he's been relegated as a very small portion to the debate and discussions, but then there's a whole international seminar on Dr. Ambedkar is very fascinating, which is very rare in Bengali academia, uh, which is uh, uh, which do not basically think to acknowledge a modern global democrat like Dr. Ambedkar. So having said this, let me sort of very quickly get into the topic that I have thought of talking about very briefly, and of course within the time limit. And this is basically a kind of work in progress that I have been doing for quite some time, and it is basically on and for this lecture I have basically drawn heavily from the 1916 lecture of Dr. Ambedkar that he had delivered at University of Columbia and in an anthropology seminar of which was organized by his own supervisor. So the title goes like this, that superimposition of endogamy and a Brahminical mechanism to basically reproduce caste purity. Basically, my idea has been to sort of to grapple with the thought of that how endogamy is basically imposed first by the religion of Hinduism, and then it is superimposed by the Brahminical mechanism, and this is basically I have borrowed this from Dr. Ambedkar's 1916 lecture. So the whole idea basically is to sort of to make an attempt to use the concept of endogamy, as a caste-based Brahminical mechanism to basically understand the very basis of caste purity. And this is from the broader theoretical sketches from Dr. Ambedkar's paper, as I said, that he read at an anthropology seminar of Golden Wizard. So my basic idea has been that to basically introduce a perspective from the top of the caste-based hierarchy, which otherwise being looked at from the bottom, because there's a huge tendency in the academia, Indian academia, which is largely dominated by the upper castes. So they basically try to use some kind of Savarna gauge to understand the whole idea of this untouchability and the Varna system, which is very peculiar to Hindu religion. So I have tried to basically introduce a perspective from the top, that how the research basically needs to look at the top, and that how the hierarchy basically functions at the top of the fourfold Varna system, as I said, which is basically a graded form of inequality in Hinduism. So this basically is an attempt again that to make to rather problematize three higher castes, basically the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. The Sudras and the outcasts are, of course, out of the system according to these three quote unquote so-called upper dominant oppressive upper castes. So these three castes I hold basically taking a cue from Dr. Ambedkar, hold them responsible for this whole idea of so-called purity and pollution, which has basically historically created this whole mechanism of endogamy. So, and let me sort of read and few lines from Dr. Ambedkar's, and I'll try to sort of explain and will read few quotes from Dr. Ambedkar's 1916 lecture of Columbia University, where he says that the endogamy is the only characteristic that is very, very peculiar to caste. And I'm sure that all of us attending this, we know that how endogamy functions. Endogamy is basically getting married within the same kind of clan or caste or system, and which is again very, very peculiar among the upper caste Hindus. Basically, you have n number of matrimonial advertisements that come up regularly in the newspapers, where you will be seeing that the Dalit Adivasi bride is not preferable, scheduled caste groom is not preferable, scheduled tribe groom bride is not preferable, so only Brahmin or only caste or only. So this is the kind of mechanism that basically keeps on holding, or let's say multiplying the whole idea of endogamy, and which is basically superimposed from the top of the three main oppressive upper castes, that is Brahmins and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. So Dr. Ambedkar very rightly in his 1916 lecture at Columbia University says that endogamy is the only characteristic that is peculiar to caste. And if we succeed in showing how endogamy is maintained, we shall practically have proved the genesis and also the mechanism of the caste. And this is a very important point that Dr. Ambedkar makes in the in his 1916 lecture. And he basically says that it may not also be out of place to basically emphasize at this moment that no civilized society of today presents more survivals of primitive times than does the Indian society, which is basically practiced by the the dominant upper caste. So and this religion, basically he's talking about in Hindu religion, and there he says that its religion is essentially primitive, and its tribal code. Tribal code does not mean the tribals, the Adivasis. It's the kind of obsolete codes, which is irrational, which is unscientific. So in spite of the advance of time and civilization, the entire primitive codes, the codes of Varna and caste system, it still operates in its pristine vigor even today. And he sort of prophesied that back in 1916, and today also this has become much more truer than ever. Now, one of those primitive survivals to which he says that he would like to draw our attention, where he says is the custom of endogamy. And this custom of endogamy is basically, is a kind of social, endogamy basically creates a social bar, let's say socio-religious bar, let me sort of call it that way, socio-religious bar for the outcasts, and this bar is basically set by the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, the quote-unquote Savarnas that we call. So these are the kind of, top three oppressive communities who set this social bar that basically superimpose endogamous, units or endogamous mechanism to sort of, to uphold the purity, so-called purity and pollution. Okay, so Dr. Ambedkar goes further, and I sort of try to relate with this. And he basically, which is intrinsically interlinked with the paper that I have proposed here. That is, he goes on to says that the problem of caste then ultimately resolve itself into one of repairing the disparity between the marriageable units of the two sexes within it, and which is left to the nature. And he which it basically tries to say that this whole endogamous practices that happens within the upper caste, it has a lot of its moral hazards, and not only moral hazards, but it also has some kind of socio-cultural hazards. And what are those hazards that Dr. Ambedkar's, pristinely sort of elaborates in his 1916 paper that he read at Columbia. And there he says that, and he brings us back to the days when the Brahmins and other upper castes, especially the Brahmins, used to sort of, practice this custom called sati, where if the husband dies, the wife will also be put on the funeral pyre. And now, why it used to happen like that? Dr. Ambedkar poses that question in front of us. And this is basically related directly with the question that I am sort of trying to problematize in my paper. And he is saying, Dr. Ambedkar is saying that a woman even, so, and that is why Dr. Ambedkar says that this whole idea of patriarchy in the Hindu religion is basically, created by the top upper caste, which is later on Professor Uma Chakraborty calls it Brahminical patriarchy. And this whole narrative of Brahminical patriarchy is to sort of, to live with the wishes of husbands, which you will find in n numbers in Manu's works and others, religious texts of Hinduism. So Dr. Ambedkar says that if a woman is not put on the funeral pyre along with the deceased husband or with the dead body of the husband, there is a moral hazard, there is a socio-political hazard in the society, because a woman who is then, surviving, if not put on funeral pyre, will be surviving, that woman can create some kind of, problems in the Hindu society in the absence of her husband. And this is a very, very problematic, truth, which is sort of, glaring, very, very glaring in the Hindu caste society. So Dr. Ambedkar says, and this is a legendary theory that he basically sort of brought forth in 1916 lecture at Columbia University. And Dr. Ambedkar says that why he basically, puts a counter question to this caste society that is basically manned by the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and versus the oppressive upper caste. And he says that how these three castes will not be doing same with a dead body of the wife. If a wife dies, why the husband will not be put on the funeral pyre? Why there is always this rule made in this caste society against the women and not for the men? And now Dr. Ambedkar reveals the reality of it, that why it is not happening like that. Why if the wife dies, why husband is not put on the funeral pyre? And Dr. Ambedkar here says that if a widow if a husband dies and the wife remains, and if wife is also not burned with the dead body of the husband, what happens in a caste Hindu society, which is very, very problematic among the Brahmins and upper caste? He says that if she is not being burned on the funeral pyre, the Hindu society will not be able to get rid of her. And that is why he says that there can be a sex disparity that can happen in the Hindu society, which can create problems in this whole, enclosed units of Hindu society. And that is why he says that every surplus woman cannot thus be disposed of, because it is an easy solution but a hard realization. And that is why he says, if a surplus woman is not disposed of, and he calls this woman a surplus woman because that is how the Hindu society, upper caste Hindu society thinks of, or let's call a Brahminical society thinks of, because if a woman, if not burned, or if a woman is not a sati, or if sati daho, in Bengali is not practiced with this woman after the death of her husband, then this woman becomes a surplus woman in the Hindu society, which believes in for one man there is a one woman who will be born. So that is why he says that Hindu Brahminical society basically thinks that a surplus woman, which is quote unquote widow here, if she is not being disposed of, that means if she is not burned along with the husband's dead body, then it can pose double danger to the Hindu Brahminical upper caste society. And that is why it says that here is a danger if this upper caste woman, if she marries outside the caste. This is one danger, he says. Double danger he talked about. So this is one danger. If she marries outside the caste and violate the endogamy, what will happen? And this is why I say this is a kind of Brahminical mechanism too, that a woman, even an upper caste woman's sexuality is also get kept by the upper caste men and the Hindu religion, where it says that if a woman, widow woman, who happens to be a surplus woman after the death of her husband, if she marries outside the caste, what will happen? And if at all, if she marries with a lower caste man, what will happen? The so-called purity of the upper casteness will go. It can be polluted. Her body can be polluted. The society, the upper caste society can be polluted. So this is one danger he talks about. Also another danger that Dr. Ambedkar is saying, that if she marries in fact, this widow, if she marries in fact within the caste, which is upper caste, then there will be a competition to encroach upon the chances of marriage that must be reserved for the potential brides in the caste, and which is true. That means if a widow, even if she gets married within her own upper caste men, then it can disturb, it can disrupt the pre-existing, one upper caste woman with one upper caste man kind of, as marriageable units. So that is why here is a double hazard or double danger that Dr. Ambedkar talks about. Another thing is that and which is what happened in the Hindu society, that enforce widowhood on that woman for the rest of her life. So far the objective results are concerned, Dr. Ambedkar says that burning is a better solution than enforcing widowhood. That is what is upper caste Hindu society thinks, and that is why it says that the burning the widow eliminates all the three evils that a surplus woman is fraught with. And being a dead and gone, she creates no problem of remarriage either inside or outside the caste. But compulsory widowhood is superior to burning because it is more practicable. Besides being comparatively human, it also guards against the evils of remarriage, as does burning. Now, another important point that Dr. Ambedkar says with regard to endogamy, he says, what about the surplus men? What about the surplus men? That means the widow men. When the wife of a man, the husband, the wife dies, what happens to the husband? Why husband is not put on the funeral pyre, or why husband is not being burnt in the Hindu Brahminical society? And there is a catch. Dr. Ambedkar explains it legendarily, and he says that the problem of the surplus man, this Hindu Brahminical society is not bothered about surplus woman. Surplus woman is a moral hazard for them. Okay, the widow woman. But surplus man, on the other hand, is an asset for them. How that is, and which is what the Brahminical patriarchy, Professor Uma Chakraborty talks about, surplus man, which is widower, is much more important for Hindu society, as Dr. Ambedkar says, and much more difficult than that of surplus woman in a group that desires to make itself in a caste. So the Hindu upper caste men are very important than the women. So women are kind of also untouchables. Their sexuality does not matter, or the sexual freedom does not matter. So it says, Dr. Ambedkar's father says, that from time immemorial, man as compared with woman has had the upper hand in caste Hindu society. And he is a dominant figure, the main a dominant figure. See how the patriarchy basically gets multiplied. The main a dominant figure in every group, and of the two sexes, that is the men and women, and it has greater prestige. And with this traditional superiority of men in Hindu society over women, the men's wishes have always been consulted. And this needs to be underlined. And women, on the other hand, has been an easy prey to all kinds of iniquitous injunctions, which is very, very peculiar to the religious, social, and economic aspects of the Hindu religion. And that is why man is a maker. Dr. Ambedkar says this, that man as a maker of injunctions is most often above them all, and such being the case, you cannot accord the same kind of treatment to a widow man the way you treat a surplus woman in upper caste. So in upper caste units. Now let me sort of bring you back to another important point that Professor Uma Chakraborty I thought of, because the time is very limited, so I thought of going into other scholars and sort of problematize their thinking, Professor Gopal Guru and others, but I'm not going there. But sort of let me wrap it up this whole discussion with Professor Uma Chakraborty's very, very important special article that she published in EPW, which is with the title Conceptualizing Brahminical Patriarchy in Early India and Gender, Caste, Class and State. And there, Professor Uma Chakraborty basically, which was published in 1993 of April 3, where Professor Uma Chakraborty, another very important historian and a prominent scholar, she says that, and this is a very important must-read article to understand the endogamy, with regard to Brahminical patriarchy. And Dr. Ambedkar, Professor Uma Chakraborty says that this whole Manu Samhita, which is basically written by Manu, and who happens to be a very, very prominent ideologue of the Brahminical system, Brahminical hierarchical system, which was Manu. So Manu basically, had lots of rulings for lower castes and for the women and for the Brahmins. Manu says that women must be closely guarded day and night. Why? Because the women's sexuality matters, and women's sexuality needs to be guarded, because if women gets out of the closed units, then the caste purity, the Brahminical purity may be hampered, or it can be disrupted. And that is why Manu says that women must be closely guarded day and night, regardless of their age. And Manu also tells us why it is that women must be guarded. And he says that building up from the need to guard against even the most trifling evil actions of women, Manu argues that by carefully guarding the wife, and which is what the most important category of women as far as the Brahmana ideologues were concerned, he says a man preserves the purity of his offspring, his family and himself. So this is the kind of argument that is everywhere. If you take up Mahabharata, where chapter number 13, 20, 59, 60, 64 to 67, 22 to 29, in the Jataka story of the page number 309, Jataka story of 1 to 6. So it is full of this, where Manu basically tells us, coming back to Manu tells us that after conception by the wife, the husband becomes an embryo and is born again of her. And according to Manu, that is the wifehood of wife. So Manu was desperately hell-bent to basically relegate the women and its sexuality to be under the complete control of the men. Now, coming back to the last few minutes, where where I'll sort of try to wrap it up by again quoting from uh, 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 mm, uh, Manu, and of course from Professor Uma Chakraborty's article. So Uma Chakraborty basically quotes heavily in this article from Manu, and shows that how Manu is the ideologue of Brahminical patriarchy, which is Brahmanbadi Purushtantra. And there she says that special responsibilities guarding women is laid upon the husband, who is represented as most vulnerable to the loss of his progeny through the infidelity of women. Look at the dangerous, patriarchal, anti-women character of Manu. And Manu says that women is kind of property, no less than the property of the husband, the wife. And Manu says also, holds men and says that even weak men must strive to guard their wives. So this is full of it. If you read more of Manu, it's basically full of it. Now, what is then this whole idea, which I sort of try to tell in this paper in the context of superimposition of endogamy. And this is not only a Hindu religious historical precedent, but it is also a very, very important Brahminical mechanism to reproduce caste purity, where and it basically sort of tries to let me sort of tell you that tries to make an attempt, to sort of relate it with this whole idea of Brahminical patriarchy in the early India, which basically reveals that the structure of social relations, which basically shaped gender, was basically reproduced by achieving the compliance of women. And this whole compliance, as Professor Uma Chakraborty would say, that the whole compliance itself was produced through a combination of consent and coercion, as we have tried to, as she has outlined. And the very last line, I'm wrapping it up, where and I'm just leaving it with my own thoughts as a conclusion, where it basically grapples with this whole idea of this mechanism, which still remains intact, which is basically sort of relegating the outcasts, the Sudras, the untouchables, the Dalits, to the margin, because their sexuality may hamper this entire endogamy. So that is why Dr. Ambedkar, when he was proposing intercaste marriages and other things, interdinings, so the Brahminical system was completely against it, because they were completely against these democratic moralities that Dr. Ambedkar all his life preached and practiced. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Naskar. And before we throw this entire session open for discussion, I would like to make a few comments on all three presentations. I hope Professor Debnath is there. Are you there? Devashish? Anyway, let's not wait for him to come online. Okay, let me first congratulate Professor Debnath for, in fact, he has summed up various implications of Ambedkar's thoughts, social, economic, political, religious, education, gender, and he has referred to Abhijit Guha to note how his thoughts have been ignored in mainstream or institutional anthropology. Ambedkar, it's true, Ambedkar organized quite a few movements against untouchability, but for many decades he remained untouchable in the institutional world of anthropology. During our studenthood, I remember Ambedkar was never ever uttered in classrooms, in seminars, never. And if it was, if his name was uttered, it was immediately challenged. That was the situation. But my point is that, okay, that 1916 paper is available with us, and whenever we discuss caste, we basically depend on two publications. One is that 1917 publication, Caste in India, other is Annihilation of Caste. But if contemporary anthropologists and other social science practitioners are taking up the issues raised by Ambedkar more than a century ago, they should support all these by the ethnographic information that is available with them. It was not available with Ambedkar in 1916. When we talk of surplus men, surplus women, and I'll add Shubhajit Naskar's presentation to this, when you mention it, it was some kind of a generalization, and that was but quite natural for his time and the information available to him. But now we know more than that, how such problems are tackled by communities, endogamous or whatever, or exogamous subgroups, how they tackle it, and how far these conform with the basic principles mentioned by Ambedkar. I think this should be done to critically understand him, find out his strength, and you need not always be sure that your hypothesis will be proved. It can be a null hypothesis also. Some parts may not find ethnographic support. Let us be ready for that, but let us throw these issues open to ethnographic examination. To Mr. Naskar, I'll come to Professor Das later. To Mr. Naskar, this notion of purity and pollution, at one point you have mentioned, leading to endogamy. I'm sorry, it's not so always, because within an endogamous group there can be different notions of, concepts of purity and pollution within the group. I do not want to lengthen this discussion, because I could offer you some examples. And then please make a distinction between Varna and Jati or caste. Varna and caste are not same. And once again I will request Mr. Naskar too, that look into the ethnographic findings of social scientists from India, from other parts of the world, and test your hypothesis. Professor Samir Das, you have offered your viewpoints, which are very illuminating, but then we would expect more from you, for example, on functioning of moral communities, genesis of moral communities and functioning. How do you look at these issues? Political parties are there, civil societies are there, and we do not depend much on political groups to become generators of moral communities, because they are more committed to their ideologies or populism, whatever. And it can be spontaneous too. Shekhar Bandyopadhyay has described the Motua Sampradaya as a moral community, and there were so many Nirguni religious movements resulting into numerous moral communities in India, and they stood in protest against casteism, against Brahminical dominance, against the system of endogamy. And then comes the issue of self-determination, probably the most critical of all issues. So we would request you to further illuminate us on this. Maybe when you publish your presentation, we'll find these answers. Thank you. Now we throw it, sorry. Now we throw it open. No. Now we throw it open for discussion and invite questions and observations.
Hello. Am I audible enough? Yeah, it's not necessary to be visible, right? So that, yeah. So all right. I was there when Professor Somit Das was speaking. In the mid of the time, I could not listen Professor Devashish Devnath's deliberations. So I'm sorry for that, but I'll read it out definitely. Devashish, here is Arup. Fine, I feel you can remember me. Dr. Professor Devashish Devnath, can you listen me? Hello?
Sorry, I'm listening, but voice is very low.
Now it's all right? Now it's all right?
Yes, please.
Yes, Devashish, myself is Arup.
Yes.
Yes, I feel that you can remember me, that we have spent a lot of good time in the field work, right? Okay. Nice to see you again in the virtual anyway. And I have not listened to you because I came late, so I cannot make any comment. But I was in the middle of Professor Somit Das. Anyway, it was good, but I could not very much understood the whole things about those kind of things. But I would definitely talk about the endogamy matters in the deliberations of the Shubhajit. I'm not using the surnames, myself is Arup. So because of the fact that since I'm the student of anthropology, I start with the quote that is very much important to me always in my life, that the purpose of anthropology is to make the world safe for human differences. So that was a quote from Ruth Benedict. So now the point of endogamy, so the endogamy point is kind of different, that in the marriage system everywhere, if you think it's not in the case of Hindu religion society, even if you can go through for the other religious system, for example, for the Islamic, if you go for the sects, Shias and Sunnis are using endogamy. And if you think about the Buddhism, they are using the endogamy, Mohajan and Hinojan. If you think about the Christianity, they are using the endogamy as a Catholic and the Protestant. So the thing is, endogamy is a matter that to choosing the mates. So now in case of the marriage rules in Indian, if you think about the Hindu caste system, is the endogamy and exogamy, too, what was Dr. Kanchan Mukhopadhyay was just speaking about. And now also I would like to mention one thing, that once you have talked about the social religious and then you convert to the social cultural. Now the point is this is a bit of misunderstanding to me. If I do not know whether misunderstanding to the other audiences, but this is a misunderstanding to me definitely, that the social religious and the social cultural. So as far as my knowledge concerned in anthropology, we do have some kind of a very smallest overall differences between the social religious and the social cultural. So I feel the way you have expressed an endogamy on the basis of the paper of 1916 by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and a lot of things has been changed. So still now I feel that it would be very much helpful to us, and if you just give your paper maybe in the printed form, that to be published, and I feel that if you can take from the 1916 to the journey of 1922, how it has been changed, if at all changed, or how it has been changed and what to be changed. So this is just a kind of humble statement to you. It's not a kind of question, that you may not give the answer right now, but I will be waiting for your writing to go through in a better way. Thank you so much.
Okay. Shubhajit. Hello. Shubhajit Naskar, would you
Yes.
like to respond
Should I
to the
Okay,
observation?
should I respond? Well,
Yes.
I appreciate the comments and whatever has been said. But I'm basically grappling with this whole question of, that how in this study of caste and, especially in the framework of this particular seminar, how this whole, and this has been my thought process for quite some time, that how in this discussion of anti-caste, how we have been missing the caste units, the units, those are basically closed, and how these units are basically the top three units, which is, as I said, the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, those are the Savarna castes, how that matters, and that is why, while I was discussing endogamy, which is basically practiced, because why I'm saying this Savarna dominant upper caste like Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya in Bengal, in other parts like Rajputs and other places, here in Vaidya and Kayasthas, it varies basically. The castes and the caste surnames vary. So my idea is to sort of delve deep into these the Savarna castes. Those basically control these marriageable units, at times through the Brahminical patriarchal system. And this is well taken that, in that professor just now was saying from anthropology department, that how in fact the other religions, Islam, not only that Shias and Sunnis, there is a new discourse in Islam, which is the Arjals and Ajlabs, Pasmandas and Sayyids, how they are also basically sort of, keeping up with their kind of, caste divisions. So, but why I am basically interested, and this is basically my paper is focused on Hinduism, and why I say this is a very, very focused one, because here there are 4 units. Out of the 4 units, there is 1 unit which is outcast, the ex-untouchables as we call it, or the depressed classes as Dr. Ambedkar would call it, and the Dalits that politicians would call it. But I am more concerned about how Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and other upper castes, they basically are sort of trying to, practice endogamy even today, because as somebody was saying that things have changed. I think things have changed for the worse, because in the last, even when we are speaking here, in the last 72 hours, there have been some Dalit woman is being burned in Bangalore by her upper caste boyfriend, when she said that let's get married or let's get settled down. She got married. And this is reported. There are many unreported. In fact, Dalit women rape cases, these are rampant. NCRB data says that out of 10, every day there is a 10 Dalit woman who gets raped. And this is the whole, some of us, those have read Professor Yasika that's coming out as Dalit, this whole system is like that, where it basically relegates the lower castes into this kind of polluted, ghettoized, stereotype kind of systematic framework, and then the upper caste ones basically try to sort of gatekeep with the pure, frameworks.
Mr. Naskar, I think you have answered the question. Professor Debnath, would you like to respond?
Thank you. I was also seeking permission regarding this matter of the endogamy and exogamy. When Babasaheb Ambedkar raised this question, endogamy is a great barrier, so that this type of stratigraphy have developed, and the lower rung or lowest rung, and who are be highly oppressed, marginalized, they are very much sufferer. But in course of time, this matter has been diluted to remove this barrier. Now, with the economic development, education development, and development of the other sex causes, we find that endogamy has been removed day by day. Rather, we find the more exogamy. What Shubhodit Naskar also pointed out, the mother, other than Hindu religion, this matter of this thing, what I would like to say that these type of things are not so much prominent in course of time. Even there are a lot of awareness and consciousness developed, and in the lower Varna system, or we can say the Shudra or Ati Shudra Varna system, due to the education and economic development. So endogamy is not the great factor for oppression. The matter of these, the oppression, or we can that the sufferings. This is he felt. His paper is in 1916, and today we are in the year of 2022, where we find a different picture, where the questions of these, because his fight is for the human rights, for liberations of this oppression. His fights mainly thrust on that. Okay, so what I say, we anthropologists should not go into the self-centering the endogamy, exogamy, this controversy. Rather, we would like to say that how the sections of the caste system, the caste institution is not so prominent like class matter, class and status matter. And we know that in our governance system, in our social organization, economic political organizations, we are giving a lot of facilities and the support to the even those who are the lying in the lower rung, lower stratigraphy. So I do think if we go into this type of controversy, endogamy, exogamy, we will be a little bit confused and make a lot of debates we will raise. Rather than what we say, the large section of the people, be it the upper Savarna or Asavarna, the matter of the thing, we have to go to the economic, education, and development parameters to see how the class system are not giving the proper opportunities and other things. That we have to be looked into the matter in anthropology. We have discussed this matter on the point of view of Babasaheb thoughts and philosophy, but this question is not so much pertinent, rather than if I consider the other dimensions and parameters like economy, education, and development. This is my
Thank you,
submission.
Professor Debnath. You have made your point. May we now request Professor Das to respond, though there was no specific question addressed to you.
Sorry, I didn't hear much of the discussion that was held here because of the poor audio at my end. I just thank everybody for giving me a patient hearing, and I learned a lot from my co-panelists. Thanks once again to the Anthropology Department, to Professor Bagchi and Ornov in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And Professor Arnab Das.
Hello, Samidda. It was splendid to listen to you. It is for the first time I was listening to your such seriously made structured presentation, and it was wonderful in the sense that sometimes we get confused that to which extreme we can really, that is, touch your pondering, but it was marvelous. But for, that is, as a whole, I think there is a confusion among others regarding caste and varna, and if you can go through, I'm talking about the other speakers, they are very much respected and nicely said, nicely delivered, but there lies certain gaps. Divakar, I think it is on 2010 or 12, he explained the historical method of Babasaheb and against Ranke's positivism. And there you can get the point of Babasaheb not looking at any static structure. Whatever I have read regarding Babasaheb's philosophy and political thoughts, especially in relation to anthropology, he was very much pragmatic, and the type of Varna system, whether Varna system was valid over India, was it a big book view or the caste is the field view? If caste is the field view, then it is very much complicated. And Babasaheb was very much against such a kind of generalization. He might formulate some of the strategic essentialism, but he was very much against. That is called for disentanglement from the whole caste system, but that does not end in caste system. That is, the counterpoint will grow beyond caste system. So his vision, I think, was a long-term vision that we need some more time to understand, and especially from the field view that Kanchanda was talking about, that is nuanced ethnographies. They are very much needed. Thank you.
Let me thank all the speakers and the audience, the August gathering, for a beautiful session and a meaningful session. Thank you.
So we have a small token of appreciation for you. It's coming. We will go for a lunch break here, and we will rejoin for session 3 at 2:45 p.m. Lunch will be served from room number 423.